We are back with Project Fierce, presented by Channel Q and A2 Music Productions. I am Angelica Ross, of course, and we touched on this a little bit with Peppermint, but I want to go even deeper on the relationships between trans and cis women, specifically Black women. Joining us is media personality and author of Bevelations, Lessons from a Mother, Auntie, Bestie, Bevy Smith, and Coach Blossom C. Brown, who is an actress, producer, activist, inspirational speaker, and so much more. Ladies, welcome. Welcome. Bring that bring that Black brilliance onto the conversation. Listen, all of you, especially I feel like what's great about this conversation is that we know each other and we have had conversations about these things for a while. Blossom, I wanted to start with you and just start with what I know that we have been on the advocacy trail and talking about what we can do to sort of create more solidarity between all of us women. Where do you think that we have made some strides in the work that we've been doing over the past few years? Do you think that things are getting better?
I do think we have made strides. I do think things are starting to get better. We are starting to have more conversations, but I would like to see more coalitions. This is kind of where I'm at right now. I'm more about the call to action. We need to begin to build coalitions between us, because lately I've been in some spaces where trying to have this particular conversation with cis women has been very triggering and traumatizing. And as a healer myself,
how so? How so?
I think what's happening is going into these particular spaces as a trans woman and trying to have a conversation with already cis triggered women who, for one, don't really know much about the trans experience. They don't understand what we go through because of the way white supremacy has come in and fooled some of them into thinking that we're just here to take everything from them, which is so not true. I'm noticing that a lot of cis women, when having this conversation, are reacting off of their trauma. And a triggers are nothing more than a reaction to trauma. And when I see that, I always get shut down by them. We don't ever get to have a productive conversation. I do believe that it's going to take healers to step up to the front and we begin to build these coalitions together where we can actually just have more one-on-one conversations and just listen to each other. We just don't listen to each other.
So what you're saying is, and I kind of, and I think, because I see some of this, what you're describing sounds to me like some of the environments on Clubhouse. And I know that you've been in some of those spaces where this ain't your advocacy, Janet on the panel, and maybe, and Bevy Smith, folks who are already sort of there. These are folks who are coming from a certain understanding or lack thereof of the trans community. And when we're then sent in to possibly educate or try to bridge a gap, that you're finding it's already in a space where it makes it really triggering and hard for us to do so. Bevy, can you put a little light on what have you seen in the progress from your side of things?
Well, unfortunately, I have to agree with Blossom. I think that there are so many really harmful conversations that are going on in public forums. Namely, I had one a couple of weeks ago in Clubhouse, and it was really bad because the people there were literally misgendering people. They were saying really harsh, talking about people being tricked, kind of like the old standard tropes that we've seen for so long, for decades, really. And it's really hurtful for me because, as a woman who, people have told me I am an ally of the LGBTQIA community, I just don't understand why we can't, to quote Rodney King, all just get along. But I think that it's because of, as Blossom was saying, the patriarchy has enforced these kind of ideas. It's the same thing with anyone that's othered, right? So, you look at, people that could actually, Black people that could vote for Trump because they're like, well, the Mexicans are taking our jobs. And you're like, well, no. And maybe it's doing more harm than good. But it's like, there's so many Black women that feel like, oh, okay, well, this man has been tricked, or these women are, well, these I won't even say some of the things that they'll say about trans women.
Yes.
Are tricking our men, and they didn't know, and all those kind of conversations. And
well, can we pause that for one quick second, Bevy? Because I just want to I want to tap on that for one quick second, because it's surprising to me that narrative is even still alive.
How is it surprising to you, Angelica? Because it's everywhere.
Well, it's surprising. But what I mean by it's so surprising to me, because I know somebody need to tell you. The only person being tricked right now is you. If you think that they don't know what's going on. Like, so for the fact, because again, Kamala Harris, this is one of the conversations again that I've had with her directly about whether it was her record or different things, and one of the things that she talked about in the progressive side of things that she's helped is with the panic defense, and sort of like eliminating that fact that people panic because what have you. And the reality is most trans girls, we know, the only panic that they're having is that somebody's going to find out, is that, and what's so, I've tried on my Turning Point show, I've tried in various circles when I've been on Twitter talking about, well, Black trans girls rock too, or, these certain things. And when I speak up, the sometimes vitriol and sometimes like stuff that comes from my sisters, it says to me that, again, when I see that kind of elevated energy, that there's more going on with them, right, than there is about what they're really upset about. But so can you, what's
Angelica, here's the problem with that, right? So if you're looking at the fact that, you have a large percentage of Black women who want to be with Black men, then we have Black men who are perhaps incarcerated, perhaps they are queer, and then you have men that are available. Some married, right? Some too old, some too young, whatever it is, right? And so then we've also been fed this information that our pool of men is very small to begin with. And we can't afford, in the mindset, we can't afford to lose not one. We certainly can't afford to lose not one to someone who is pretending, it's not my words, pretending to be a woman. Okay.
Is what they're saying, is what they believe. Yes.
Right. And so then also too, we are living in this space right now where, the Instagram body is the ideal. And for better or for worse, and I think we all can admit this here, that body type, that ideal has always been the top of the hierarchy when it comes to trans women, right? I think that we can all agree with that, right? And so these women have these bodies, this body, yada, yada, yada. So not only do we have to worry about the white girls who are getting all the implants and all the things and having these bodies, and the Latina girls, and now we got trans women as well. So I think that there's like this idea that this is competition. But you don't want to.
But what's so interesting about what you're saying is that the men, Black men, aren't thinking the same way. And what I mean by that is they know the reality, because that's all foolishness, because they know that what it means is, you mean there's more women available to me? And they are taking advantage of those odds, these men, and they're lying to both of us about what the situation is and making us think in the scarcity mode when they're not. They're just taking advantage of the situation. When if on the opposite side, if we as women could realize that dick is a dime a dozen.
Right.
Amen. If we could realize how, especially when it comes to Black men, and make them step up their standards, because what I also feel is that there's a pick-me nature sometimes around Black women when it says they'll like fold to a certain type of man or behavior just because, it's better this than being alone. So they'll have a man who is homophobic, but that means if you have children with him, he might be homophobic towards your child.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, those are all very big issues. And I think and I think also too, just when we think about the community, it's detrimental to us as a community. See, so when I was growing up, my aunt had a best friend named Tony. Now, Tony because it's, you know, it could be male or female, right? Tony was back in the day, because Tony is now, well, Tony just died, but Tony would have been 80 something years old. So when Tony was in her prime, she was called a drag queen. As you guys know, back in the day, they didn't have the language. So Tony was a drag queen, right? And she was a female performer. She was an impersonator, is what they used to call them, female.
Yes, I used to do it. So we used to call ourselves female impersonators. Yeah. And then that's the whole thing about language. When we learn better, we just understand. But back then, that's all we knew.
Right. And so that language is still here, right? It's still prevalent. It's still present. So then you grew up in a household where you're like, that's a female impersonator. So you're like, it's very easy for someone to come on a computer and say, oh yeah, but that's not really a woman. That's a man do. How many times have you heard that? That's a man do. And then not understanding. And then, of course, when we look at Dwayne Wade's daughter, Zaya, the same conversations that went on about her and everything. And then about she's too young, like she's getting, you know, anyway, the
implants and hips. You know what I'm saying? Like she's not doing nothing but identifying as Zaya. That's what they're allowing her to do.
They're already hysterical about it.
Blossom, do you have anything to add on to that?
I do, because she's definitely hitting on some stuff. Because you know we talk about that dick, that black dick. That black dick is getting black trans women killed at the same time. Because what's really happening is people are thinking that we're getting killed because we're tricking the men. No, it's actually because we're actually telling them who we really are. What's happening is when a third person finds out that this man has been with this trans woman, the man has to prove his manhood and his loyalty to him or her, and by all means, killing a black trans woman. One of the black trans women that just got recently killed is from my hometown. That's what happened to her. And the reality of it is, I think that we have put in place this hierarchy in the Black community that puts Black cis men at the top and Black trans folks at the bottom. When something happens to the Black cis man, because he's deemed the most dangerous in America, especially when we deal with police brutality, all of us as Black people are expected to march and we're expected to protest. And in the same breath, we want to talk about how that same Black man is also killing Black trans women and how sometimes Black cis women gaslight that conversation in the middle. There's people in the middle that want to gaslight that conversation. So what does it look like? We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it because we think that we're going to water down the Black movement. White people are going to say, well, y'all say all Black lives matter, but you have Black hetero cis men killing Black trans women. So does Black lives really do matter? Does it really, really matter?
And I know what you're saying about, where you're mentioning about gaslighting that conversation, because what happens is when a Black trans woman is murdered, when we hear about that, instead of hearing the rush of solidarity or the rush of anything, it is an assumption to, well, y'all need to be stopped. Y'all wish, yeah, you know, and there's always some way to either explain it or to say, well, y'all, you know, every man ain't gonna be to kind of almost like excuse a certain behavior or a performance of masculinity. And we've got to get beyond that. What, you know, it's interesting because I just feel like everyone is kind of performing for one another, meaning like there are circumstances where there are so many cis men who are very cool with trans women. Absolutely. Very cool. Until maybe some other energy shows up. And there are cis women who are really cool with trans women or whatever, until it comes time to like, when they may lose their positioning and sort of like, well, look, I'm dealing with this too. Like we're all dealing with violence. Well, okay, so why not be each other's sister? Why not how about we stop making excuses for who is deserving of the violence? You know what I mean? Like it feels like that's what's being said.
A lot of it, Angelica, also is performative allyship. A lot of it is performative allyship where you're cool with me one minute, but like you just said, when another energy comes in, oh, it's a switch up. It's a whole switch up. This is why I'm hoping for solid accomplices who are loyal, always on the front line, who are always willing to do the work for us. Now, I'm very intuitive, so I can always kind of tell who can do what, but I don't think we've gotten to that point just yet. but I do think we do need to move in that direction where the actions have to stop being so performative. I do need my sisters standing in solidarity with me, my trans sisters, as well as my cis sisters. There are definitely people out there that want to focus on us, that want to amplify our voices. For me personally, I'm at a point now where I want to focus more on those individuals. I want to coach those individuals to move higher. The people who don't care about us, who don't give a damn about our existence, they're going to jump on the train when they want to. I'm not going to waste any more time, any more energy, wasting my time on them. I need to amplify our already accomplishments now. This is the area where I want to move to. And I just feel like they can reach their full potentiality if they just tap in. And I've been saying this a lot lately within our LGBTQ community, especially with our LGBT brothers and sisters and siblings, because even though you may identify as gay or bisexual, you still have a cis privilege that I don't have as a trans person. So if you hear homophobic and
trust, honey, there's so many of them in our community that are transphobic. I follow one dude on Instagram, and he's sometimes his posts are all funny or whatever, but then I realized some of the posts, I'm like, hey, I had to pull him to the side in the DMs, and I'm like, hey, I love following you. I laugh at some of these things, but some of these posts that you're making are transphobic, and sometimes it be cis women that are the joke of the thing, but there is, because that cis women is appearing manly or whatever, that she's being made fun of. And I'm like, this is transphobic. So,
absolutely.
But I'm on the same page as you when I'm no longer talking to folks and wasting my energy with folks who really don't even see it for my existence.
Yes.
So if that's the level you at right now, where you struggling, like really struggling with the idea of trans people in my existence, baby, you don't even get to be close to me until you get yourself together on a few different levels. But when you finally get to a certain level, when you know that actually being in my presence is a gift, and you get ready to be blessed, get ready to be blessed. You know what I'm saying? That your children that you have that are queer, your nieces and nephews, if you don't recognize yet that they are gifts in their queerness and in their transness, this is a level you can't even talk to me. I'm not even spending my energy and wasting my time on you right now.
Absolutely.
So Blossom, what can you talk to, because I know you're a good advocate in this space of just being able to speak to this, just not just during Women's Month, not just during Black History Month, but all year long. What are some things that you think that both cis men and women need to learn about the trans community? What is it? What is something that you think that they're getting wrong right now that they need to learn?
I think that somehow, some way, they think that we are a separate, complete movement from the Black community. I need them to really understand that I exist too within this Black spectrum. It's my birthright. My Blackness is my birthright. And just because I choose to identify the way that I know to identify, the way that I was meant to identify, why do you see me as a threat? I really want to sit down in very safe spaces and begin to have these discussions, be able to have these conversations. I need you to leverage your privilege in some fashion, shape, or form. When I'm not in the room, if someone wants to be transphobic to me behind my back, I need you to set them straight. I need you to start holding more people accountable. That's how coalitions begin to build.
When you talk about having a safe space, though, what is that?
Yes.
Like meaning when we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and I know you talked about entering into like clubhouse spaces and what have you. And for me, I know for many other trans women, that would not be a safe space.
It would not.
So
absolutely.
What does a safe space look like?
I think a safe space for me would look like, through the power of media in some fashion, shape, or form, that actually have these power talks. Because I'm actually about to start doing a power talk show on my YouTube channel coming up. And I think when we create those particular spaces where we sit down at the table and just listen to each other's perspective without judgments, because we're all taught different things. We all have different ideologies. Some of us don't know that our ideologies are problematic. And I think that there's just a lot of general misunderstanding within our community. And this is how the healing begins. We are a very traumatized community as a whole. And I'm talking about Black people as a whole. When we begin to usher in healing and understanding, that's when we begin to look at perspectives differently. I do think that the power of media is the way to do it, because it will get people to watch, to listen, to tune in when they see somebody that looks like them. I think that's a strategic way. And
it's just a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot. I mean, I just feel like in similar ways where white people plead ignorance when it comes to the discussion around racism, when Google is right there. I don't know. There's a certain level where I get to think about, like, okay, how much talk is, too much talk? When does it get to be a point where like you said, we want to see that action. We want to see what does it look like in action. So, being mindful, because one thing I'm trying to always do is just be mindful of when I am just having dialogue with people. I don't want to give, like Oprah. I remember Oprah had like these racist people on her show, and just giving this airtime to a really ignorant point of view just because we haven't heard, or what I mean? Like, so it's absolutely, because there's so many people who just want to sound right and just want to like almost do a dog whistle out to those other folks. So like I may have seen when T.S. Madison and Kaya got into their, whole situation and argument, you had all of a sudden cis women who were never for trans women to begin with, all of a sudden now using that moment to basically whistle out to all these other women who are going to be transphobic against Madison for saying, saying things that were, I don't think they were cute, but the thing is that her and Kaya, those are things she got from Kaya. Kaya is the one, you stank Pete, it's just saying all these things about, so they're saying it together. So when you take them apart, like they, now are no longer together. And now the things that each one of them said, it's almost like in a space where folks found it funny or okay to be misogynistic, I think.
Yes.
And, in saying these things about a woman's vagina and this, that, and whatever, but also folks found it funny and okay to be transphobic in some of the things that maybe, that in T.S. Madison's presence, that's being sort of just allowed to fly, sort of situation. Right. So, I don't know. I think that things are getting better. And I think that the answer is, like you're saying, Blossom, is to focus on the sisters who get it. What I wanted to say, because as I'm reading your book, Bevelations, as I'm reading it, you have had a life, and you have met and rubbed shoulders with a little bit of everyone, and you've seen the industry literally change over so much time. So now, learning what you've learned, because I think that for you being an ally, it's an active thing. You've always, you're someone who I see has been always open to things. So what have you learned, and how have you learned to maybe continue to make change and maybe hold other cis folks accountable when you encounter the homophobia and trans? Because listen, I know you're thick in the culture. Everybody knows Bevy, and whether it's music, movies, television, or what have you, you have rubbed shoulders with almost everybody. So, and I know that you have to probably have, experienced some of that. So how do you, or how have you learned to sort of hold accountability in that space?
Well, I think it's the same way if you're a Black person and you have a white friend, you expect them when they're with their white friends or white family and you stop them down, you expect them to stop them down and say, well, no, that's not the language you should be using about that person. That's offensive. That's a slur, what have you. So that's the bare minimum that we should be doing. Then we should be having conversations. And I'll tell you something else, Angelica, and I don't know if you and Blossom touched on this, but the gay men transphobia is off the charts.
We did talk. Yes, we tapped on it. But go ahead. I'm gonna let you continue. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you one of the girls. You know what I mean? That's the thing. That's the thing. It's a pick me kind of, but it's a pick me kind of mentality where a gay man is able to sit around and kiki with a straight cis woman about a trans woman, because that means that y'all not kikiing about me.
Right. Exactly. Or it's just that both parties have not done the work to educate themselves about trans people. You know what I mean? And because I don't even think it's all the time a catty situation. I've literally had people tell me that they're afraid of trans people. Like as though trans people are like, you know, people can be afraid of a clown. I've had people literally say to me that they're, you know what I mean? I've had people say to me they're afraid of trans people, like it scares them. And I'm like, well, why does it scare you? You know what I mean? And I'm like, you know, not for nothing.
That's the question. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like you have to look at that. And
I mean, you know, in India, they're scared of trans people, but that's because, you know, they believe and know that we got powers. So they know we can bless your situation or curse it all the way up. So maybe y'all need to be afraid. Maybe y'all need to be afraid.
No, because that's true, right? And that's like in Hawaii. That's the reason why you see so many trans people there working completely normal jobs, because they do think of trans people as a higher power. And you see that. And I've told friends of mine about that, because you don't see trans people that are not, what's the proper term? Passing or passable?
Non-binary.
No.
Yeah, when they're, you're saying, if they're not cis assumed. Yeah, so we used to say passing and things like that. But when people, when they're not assumed to be cis, basically.
Yes, but you'll see people are not assumed to be cis working in banks, supermarkets. You don't see that here. You don't see that here. And we need to get to that point. But you know, I just think that for me, it's definitely step one is stopping people from using transphobic conversations and language around you. That's part one, no matter who does it. Because I will never forget, and I'm sorry I have to keep coming back to this, but I will never forget when I had to tell several of my gay friends that you could not use tranny. And they were like, you don't get to tell me that. I'm a part of this community. And I'm like, no, and I know I'm not a part of this community, but I do know enough to know you're gay. You're a gay man. That comes with privilege. And so you using tranny, that term is just as derogatory as a cis white man. You know, a heterosexual cisgender white man. It's just as harmful, hurtful, all the rest of it. And so I think for me, it's about, just like everything else, it needs to have exposure. I'm very excited that Luke James is coming back for season 3 or is it 4 of The Chi. And, you know, he's dating a trans woman in the TV show. Yeah. And they have a family. They are actually a familial unit. It's his little brother and this wonderful, beautiful young trans actress.
Baby, look at you spilling tea. Yes, come on.
and they're coming back, and they're going to be a family. And
that's amazing.
And it's a heterosexual young Black man who is a robber. He's a stick-up kid with his beautiful trans wife and his son that they're going to raise as mother and father.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to be definitely looking out for that, because that is definitely the kind of change we need. Just like we saw India Moore and Queen and Slim, we need to see more of this being normalized. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me for this conversation. I know we, have just been just going over, but that's because we know each other, we know the work, and we know what needs to be said. So thank you for saying all the things that need to be said.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell for all notifications from radio.com. While you're at it, why don't you check out some of our other great videos.